Rev up your engines!
Well, Biden's calling for a suspension for 3 months of the federal gas tax. Now, let's face the facts. You're spitting in the ocean here. Well, what does it turn out to be? The federal tax is 18 cents or so per gallon. And what does that come out of if you're paying $5 a gallon? That's 3.6%. Spit in the bucket. If they even do it, it's not diddly squat for us. But on the other hand, it's a whole bunch of money the government won't be getting. We have the powers that be spending but not taxing. They're going to rebuild the country. They're going to do this, blah, blah, blah. He's going to lower the tax on it. That's a lot of money. People use a lot of gasoline, right? A lot of money the federal government won't be getting. Where are they going to magically get all the money to pay for their Build Back Better? One of the stupidest slogans I ever heard of. We're going to do all this stuff, but we're going to get rid of this tax. Hey, come on now. They're grasping at straws. And in the end, how does it affect us? Hardly at all. You save 3.6% on what the gas costs. We're talking peanuts here. I guess he thinks we're fools at the circus, and if he throws his peanuts, we'll be happy with it, you know? If it even happens, who knows if it'll even happen. But it isn't going to stop the pain at the pump. And then what was Biden's comment to the oil companies? Remember, he sent a letter, said, you're bad, you're nasty, you're ripping everybody off. They gave him all these reasons back why the feds are trying to stop gasoline and go electrified, so they're not going to invest in something they're not going to make a profit at, right? So what's Biden's comeback to that? He said, I believe that oil company executive was mildly sensitive. Mildly sensitive. He couldn't even say sensitive. He had to say mildly sensitive, you know? Talk about somebody who's, afraid of his own shadow. Like this 3.6% drop in price is going to really help us, you know? The oil companies are just laughing at him. They're laughing at us, too, raising the prices. Hey, I think the prices are all wrong, too, you know? It's greed. It's greed on one side and it's stupidity on the other side. What a country we live in these days. Even the U.S. Energy Administration admitted that the refineries in the United States are pretty much operating at peak capacity. They can't make any more. And they're not going to be building any refineries anytime soon. They haven't built a new one in the United States, I believe, since the 1970s. That was a long time ago, right? Because there's legislation that says you build new ones, they have to have all this stuff in them. So they don't build any new ones, and they just use the old ones that are grandfathered, and they don't have to have all these things the newer ones did by legislation. Now, there's always a loophole. Come on now. We have lawyer politicians, we have oil companies, and we have their lawyers. Don't think they're not all going to be colluding in the back room to cut a deal for themselves. Old Joe's going to save us 3.6% on gas if he drops it for 3 months. Spit in the bucket. Cross Corner says, my '07 Jeep Grand Cherokee drinks oil. 2007 Jeep Grand Cherokee. 151,000 miles. It runs great, but it adds 2 to 3 quarts between oil changes at 3,000 miles. Where's the oil going? Well, obviously it's burning oil. If it was leaking, you'd see a mess of oil on your driveway. You don't see that. It's burning. Pray it's the simplest thing, which is a bad PCV valve, positive crankcase ventilation. If your piston rings are worn, it will blow oil through the PCV valve if it's stuck open, and then you'll burn a lot of oil. Try that. It might help. If it does, great. If not, you're pretty much screwed. The only other reason is your piston rings are worn out or your valve seals. And either way, you'd have to rebuild the engine. If you're curious about that, do a wet compression test. Take out the spark plugs, put a compression tester, put a teaspoon of oil on each cylinder, and then do a wet compression test. And if the pressure goes way up, your piston rings are worn because that seals them and shows that they're worn because the pressure goes way up, and then you'd have to rebuild the engine. 2 to 3 quarts between changes, keep adding it. It's a lot cheaper than, if the PCV valve doesn't fix it, just keep adding it, because you're going to really rebuild an engine on an old Jeep with 151,000 miles. It's a gas hog. Probably not a smart idea. Jock Lee says, I'm looking for a fuel-efficient, non-hybrid car. 2017 and up. What's good on gas? I looked at a Mitsubishi Mirage and then Honda Fit or Civic. The Mirage is more fuel efficient. What do you think? I would not buy the Mitsubishi. Mitsubishi isn't that big of a car company. It's a heavy industry. That's one of their sidelines in Japan, making cars. Not a big deal to them. They're not the greatest cars. Not horrible cars, but they're not great cars either. A Fit or Civic is going to last so much longer. The little bit in gas mileage go to the Honda. You save a tiny bit between the Civics and the Mirage. You get a little bit better gas mileage than the Mirage, right? When it starts breaking and you spend thousands fixing it and the Honda's still purring around at 200, 300, 400,000 miles, you'll thank me for telling you to buy the Honda. Because the little bit of money you save between those, the Hondas still get good gas mileage. They are going to outlast. And also look at the Toyota Corolla. They get good gas mileage and they're excellent too. So I go Corolla or Honda long before I'd go Mitsubishi. They just have a history of having problems, the cars, transmissions, engines burning oil, and it's not that big of a car company. It's not their main thing. It's a sideline where Honda and Toyota's cars are their big thing. Koye says, I've got a brand new Toyota Tacoma. It's at the shop. I bought a 2022 SR5 V6 two-wheel drive Toyota Tacoma. It's at the dealership. It has under 4,000 miles. Check engine light came on. Brake traction light comes on. I got a warning that says a malfunction in the electronic control of the engine throttle automatic transmission has been detected. Dealership said it might be the camshaft or something else. I'm waiting for them to know something. Do you think I could have wrecked something? Not really. I mean, you got less than 4,000 miles. Didn't even need an oil change. Obviously, they screwed up something when they built it. That's the only thing that I worry about with Toyotas now is the Tacomas are all made in Mexico. They used to make half of them in San Antonio, half of them in Mexico, but now they're only making the big ones, the Tundras in San Antonio, and they're not making any of the Tacomas there. They're making them all in Mexico, and all I say is everything I've ever seen made in Mexico had quality control problems. It's a country that has quality control problems, more than just building cars. Hopefully this is the one-off, and I won't get a bunch of letters from other people saying the same thing. You never know. I mean, it could be screwing up putting them together in Mexico. You pay people less, generally you're going to have lower quality. I have no idea what Toyota pays them because they never give the information out. But GM in their factories down there, a lot of the guys are getting $6.85, not an hour, for a 12-hour workday. What kind of quality are you going to get for that? Poor quality. Could be they got quality problems. I don't know. Toyota won't tell them what they're paying their workers. They're non-union workers there. But I'm sure they're paying them less just like everybody else. Aaron Clark says, I have hissing around my AC compressor on my 95 Caprice. I replaced the AC lines. I hear hissing from the compressor. Old vehicles like that, say you shut them off, you hear a hissing. Sometimes it's just the systems are old and they equilibrate inside and you hear a noise as the refrigerant moves around inside. When you're at idle and resting and the car's turned off, both the high and the low side should be like 90 pounds or so. So they equilibrate and sometimes they hiss. If it's a leak and it's hissing, you'd have to fix it because it's around the compressor. What you would do is, once you shut it off, you hear the hissing. Get some dishwashing soap. Pour it around. And if you see bubbling, it's a leak because the hissing is going to be hissing out. The system's pressurized. So the leaks will come out. And if you put dishwashing liquid all around, all of a sudden you see bubbles coming out, you know that's where the leak is coming from. And in that case, you probably have to replace the compressor if it's coming from the front or the back where the main seals are. Now, if it comes out where the lines bolt on, it could just be that they need new gaskets for the lines. Pray it's that. So let's say you find no leaks and it works okay, just live with it because as AC systems are shut off, like I say, the system has to equilibrate, both sides have the same pressure. Sometimes older ones like that, it is the 96, will just hiss as the refrigerant moves around until it stops. Elderly says, I want to change an accessory socket on my car to a cigarette lighter accessory socket. I got a 2001 Honda Accord. It has one accessory socket, and I want to put a lighter compatible socket. Are there any issues here? There shouldn't be. Power is power. Now, the one thing is, you have to go find the fuse for your accessory socket. There'll be a fuse in a fuse box, right? See what amperage it is and see if you're going to use more amperage than that. Let's say it's a 10 amp fuse. As long as you're putting in a cigarette lighter that isn't going to use more than 10 amps, that's perfectly good. Now, if you're going to use it for heavier, dutier applications, more than what that particular wiring is set up for, you could also do it relatively easy if you want. You would just run thick wire from the battery terminal, the positive terminal, to the cigarette lighter, and then put an inline fuse of whatever amperage you want. If you want a 20 amps, you put a 20 amp fuse, and then ground it to the body of the car on the other side. So you would have it directly from the battery with its own fuse, and that's the safest way to do it if you're going to use any kind of extreme power. Because I've seen it in my own customers' cars. They'll have a cigarette lighter, then they'll plug like 5 chargers into it. Well, they'll keep blowing the fuse. Sometimes they'll melt wiring because they weren't made to take that kind of power. You got to see what amp fuse is for your socket, and don't use anything that's going to use more amperage. Or if you're really worried and you're going to use a lot of power, like I say, run thick wires from the battery to the new one that you're putting in, and a fuse of whatever amperage, and a new ground wire. Then you're running directly from the battery to the cigarette lighter, and you're not going through any of the wiring of the car, and it can't screw anything up as long as you put the correct rated fuse on the wire that you put to the new accessory. A lot of times you're going to add stuff that's smarter. The kids that know what they're doing with their big they will run special wiring from the battery to their stereo system. They won't run it off the wiring of the car. It'll have its own wiring connected to the battery. Sometimes they'll put an extra battery in the car to help run it. It's smart. If you're going to put in heavy duty stuff, you need to rewire it directly to batteries and bypass the wiring of the car so you don't screw something up. So if you never want to miss another one of my new car repair videos, remember to ring that bell.